Hello, welcome to American Christian or Christian American. I'm Sean Legacy, and I'm your host. If you haven't yet subscribed, please subscribe. It helps the channel grow, and if you like this video, please push the like button. It also helps it get out to more people. Today, we're going to be talking about that phrase that Caucasians tend to use. Not all Caucasians, but too many. Slavery is over. Jim Crow, segregation's all over. Why can't they just get over it? Why do they have to sit here crying about everything? My response is, really? Let's look at a video that talks about just that. And then let's go on from there. And let's put this thing together. Wrap it up, send it home with you, do a nice bow. All right?
Listen to what this pastor says and his thoughts on black people. And if this is what they're teaching in church, then we have a huge problem.
I'm sure there's a lot of Africans that were brought over into slavery, which wasn't right, but they got the gospel when they got here. And you know what? I bet you there's a lot of Africans that if they hadn't have been brought over, not saying it was right, don't misunderstand, not justifying the slavery and the situation, but God, I still believe, used it. And now I'm sure there's a lot of Africans that got the gospel and they're in heaven right now because they got the gospel. You know, what would be better for them to have lived their entire life in Africa free, doing their voodoo or whatever, and then dying and going to hell, right? Or what happened? And then they go to heaven. They get the opportunity. Now, again, it doesn't justify it. The ends do not justify the means, but this is how God works. This is what God does in the Bible. And we have black people in here. I don't think any of you guys were ever slaves. I was never a slave. It's like, white privilege. You were never a slave. You were never living during the time, unless you're very old, like 60 or 70 maybe, or 80 years old. You're never even living during the time where segregation was a thing in this country. I mean, what are you crying about? Nothing even happened to you. You're just making up stuff. You can't look at the facts that I was reading and just attribute that to some kind of white privilege. It's not real. Get over it. Quit having all the excuses. Why don't you take some responsibility for your choices? Be content with whatever situation you were born into and make the most of it. God's not limited to your situation. He can do above, what we ask or think.
Let me know what you think in the comments. Listen to what this pastor said.
So here we go. Here's this preacher talking about all this stuff. And he even claims that, it was so good that black people came over here. Yeah, slavery wasn't such a good thing. But, they got taught about Jesus and they're in heaven because of that. But we don't account for the fact that they had the Bible before us. They were Christians before us. They were the cradle of civilization. And it wasn't for the Moors who moved to conquered Spain and then set up universities and brought education to Europe. Europe would have been much more in the Dark Ages. Were pretty much illiterate until the Moors came in, which were very dark complected people, about the level of Ethiopians, which are some of the darkest complected people on earth. Now there's other places where those people exist. Also reddish tone to the skin. For fact, the current numbering system came through the Moors. It wasn't invented by Moors. It was invented by Arabs and some Indian based from India. And so we have that because of them through the Moors. But yet we think that we have all the lockup on Jesus Christ when we don't. Actually, the gospel came to Rome and converted many people, and then 300 years into the first few centuries, Constantine befriended the church and in the process distorted the church and created Catholicism, which was an extension of the Roman Empire and made the first example of Christian nationalism, using God as an excuse for another agenda. That's what they were, and that's what still exists today, Christian nationalism. So, yes, there were probably some people in Africa who were worshiping other things, but there have also been discoveries of people in Africa worshiping God the way it was intended to be all along. So using an excuse like we were able to convert them because we brought them over as slaves is far from the truth, especially when We didn't want them to read because we wanted to keep promoting that they were less intelligent. We didn't want them to, in fact, they were penalized, perhaps even sold off, or maybe even put to death for reading. The British created the Slave Bible, which cut out most of the Bible, just kept stuff in that supported slavery and how you should be good to your masters. Yeah, we really cared about their souls, didn't we? Now, as far as this thing saying they should just get over it, let's look at a few more things about that, and then we'll talk about it. I'm going to play for you a few different videos consecutively, and then we're going to talk about it. This is information about a black man who was lynched in 1998. There is a movie out there on Tubi called Jasper, Texas. But this man, I'm not going to read it all. I'm just going to put it here, and I'm going to give you a little bit of summary. But this man was tied with chains around his ankles by these three white men mentioned in this article, and they dragged him down the road for 3 miles on asphalt, while his flesh, his clothes and his flesh were being ripped away from his body, or like sandpaper, where areas of his body were gouged out. He was alive as they went down this road, as he tried to shift from different angles from the pain that was going through his body. About 1.5 miles, a little more into this, there was something that he hit, and it severed his head, his arm, and shoulder away from his body. Of course, at this point, he died. They continued to drag the rest of his torso and body down the road for about 1 mile. A total, it was about 3 miles. But people say, well, why are they crying about it? All this stuff is in the past. This was 1998. Really? How far in the past is it? Not that far. And there's things that have happened since then. It goes on and on, folks. One of the articles of James and about, the lynching in Texas. So you should look up as many things as you can about it if you really care. But this also talks about led to pass of hate crime laws and things like that. So take a look at this. You can put this on pause if you like and look through this. Otherwise, do your own search and look this up. So here we have another situation here. You can look at this, about this man here. And he was pursued this is in Georgia, he was pursued by 3 white men in a truck, and who later claimed that they thought that he was a burglar, but he was just jogging. And they shot and killed him, racially motivated. And this took place in 2020. So we're in 2026 now, and that's only been, 6 years? 6 years. And here's another story of a racially motivated murder. So we've got in 1998, a man is dragged down the road against the pavement. And if you look up the movie Jasper, Texas, they're going to give some more ideas. A town that thought that it had all its racial problems resolved, and finding out, no, we don't. Because people started talking about issues that went along with this. So, yes, we haven't made some improvements, but is this stuff all gone? Do black people no longer have anything to complain about? Absolutely not. It's all present. It's all here. And 1998, they should get over it after that. Well, then you got 2020 and this other man. Okay? So how recent do we go? They've been saying get over it for years, and yet it's still happening. George Floyd in 2020 as well. So when is enough before we just can get over it? If things would stop happening, maybe people could get over it. But it isn't happening. It's just an excuse amongst racist people who want to continue what's going on. And then they twist things around, they lie about things, and they perpetuate the same garbage that was going on for centuries. People, African Americans in this country, have to deal with constant oppression in this country. Yes, they've made strides. Yes, they have overcome some things. Yes, some things have improved. But yet, we have Trump trying to roll things back again. It never ends, people. Maybe it would have less of a chance if more people wake up. And maybe have less of a chance if more Christians weren't just basically racist people. Oops, sorry. Let's look at another video.
The murder of podcaster Charlie Kirk, I made a video where I quoted him saying, quote, MLK was awful. He's not a good person, unquote. He went on to say that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was a, quote, huge mistake, unquote. Why? Because he believed it led to, quote, permanent DEI type bureaucracy, unquote. This was said by Kirk at America Fest, December 2023. Following my post, some Christian evangelicals told me, Cody, you're taking him out of context. Have you heard this? So I did what they asked. I went back. I dug up everything I could. I read the Wired article that cited the quotes, and then I listened to a full 1 hour and 22-minute podcast on the myth of MLK by Charlie Kirk. On that podcast, Kirk and his guests spent most of that time dragging MLK's legacy, talking about his orgies, rape, 40-plus affairs, and calling him a womanizer. Then Kirk said, quote, this is not necessarily disqualifying, but it should give us pause, unquote. Evangelicals reached out to me and said, see, Kirk's right. MLK wasn't a good person. Hold on. These are the same Christian evangelicals who call Trump a divinely ordained leader. Trump, who paid hush money to a porn star, who admitted to grabbing women wherever he wants, who was found liable for sexual abuse and has a long list of confirmed extramarital affairs, and that didn't give you pause? And somehow he's, quote, God's chosen, unquote. But Dr. King, whose highly disputed accusations were by a politically motivated FBI, is, quote, awful, unquote. That's not just hypocrisy. That is racism. It reminded me of growing up in white evangelical spaces. Did you know the first thing I was taught about MLK wasn't his dream? It was about his moral failures. But no evangelical I know has ever prefaced Trump or the MAGA movement with his moral failures. Why? Because that's how white supremacy works. It's sometimes quiet, subtle, and dressed up as concern for morality. Friends, rebranded racism can be clever, educated, and well packaged. But rebranded racism is still racism. This doesn't need context. It needs repentance.
Okay, so now we talk about here, because people have downgraded Martin Luther King Jr. And Charlie Kirk was good at doing that too. That's because they were trying to dig up stories on him to discredit him during the civil rights movement. Why would they do something like that? Because they wanted to maintain a racist, classist system in order to keep people down. So they had to make up things to discredit a good man. Charlie Kirk was talking about how awful a man he was. Charlie Kirk degraded black women. Charlie Kirk was a racist person, just like other evangelicals in this country, who sit here and praise Trump as being the Christian person who is utterly immoral, utterly criminal, utterly hateful and powerful and greedy. And yet these people who claim to be followers of God put him up as their hero. This tells you, folks, they are not Christian people. Don't discount Christianity or Christians, but do discount all those people, because it's always going to be a lot of them who use Christianity for their own gain and own power, who want to follow God on their terms and not on God's terms. God is real, God is just, God is loving, and God's word is right. But not everybody who uses that word is right. They can educate themselves, make themselves sound beautiful, sound right. That doesn't mean they are. They are criminally, they're blasphemous against God. They use his word to promote hate. They have done that since the inception of the idea of slavery of this country, and as far as evangelical goes, even if they didn't call themselves evangelicals at the time, they were racist, hateful, horrible, cruel, murderous people. And yet you have these same people saying Martin Luther King was not a good man. No, he wasn't a good man for them, but he was a good man for just and good people. He was a beautiful person. But yet people want to spread lies about him, and they want to promote a man like Charlie Kirk, who was nothing but a racist, hateful person. Now, I don't believe anybody should have murdered him. I don't believe anybody should be murdered. But we cannot hold him in esteem. He was an evil, evil man who hated people, who was out for his own promotion, his own good, and his own power, and his own wealth. We have to stop promoting that. But this country is very much a racist country. It's probably one of the most racist countries in this world. Now, there's been some doozies. There's been, Hitler and others, but white people have murdered far more than what was murdered in Hitler. Those facts exist too. But we've seen what we've talked about is enough for today. But we're going to get to it. We're going to come back at it. I hope you'll keep coming. I hope you, if you're new, you'll come again. Until the next time on American Christian or Christian American.